Coming up on this episode, the Warriors miss a huge opportunity to grab the fourth seed in the Western Conference and now find themselves back in the logjam after a 106-96 defeat to the Houston Rockets. Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast after the Warriors suffer a 106-96 loss to the Houston Rockets at Chase Center on Sunday. And I suffered a similarly disappointing L on my post-game live stream where I was going for, I think, 5 or 10 minutes working fine. And then I went for another 10, 15 minutes or so without my audio working at all. And I didn't actually realize until, 10, 15 minutes later where a bunch of people were trying to point it out to me in the comments. But unfortunately, I didn't see them before making a complete fool of myself, and that was quite embarrassing. So I apologize to those of you that did tune in to the live stream for that stuff up. We'll try again on Tuesday against after the game against the Suns, but obviously there's been a few issues with the internet, and now for some reason the mic decided to cut out after 5 or 10 minutes today. So again, apologize for that. And to those of you that did tune in, some of what I say here would have already been said when you could actually hear me in the live stream. So some of this stuff will be rehashed, but I did want to jump on a podcast episode and still get some thoughts and discussion going after this game, because we know the implications of every game from here on forth for Golden State in the Western Conference that is continuing to get closer and closer, the closer the end of the regular season gets here. The Warriors had an opportunity to grab the fourth seed with the Denver Nuggets losing to the Indiana Pacers. They could have been outright fourth with a win here, but instead now become one of 5 teams with 32 losses. I think the Warriors are currently 6th. The way it works out at the end of the season is that if there are more than 2 teams, 3, 4 teams, I believe it's the winning percentage, obviously, of each team against those teams that are also tied with them, if that makes sense. So I'm not sure I want to, take too much focus of it right now, because to me, there's still 4 games to go, and I look at it and think if the Warriors just win out from here, then I'm very confident they'll finish as a top 6 seed and still could potentially get home court advantage and finish 4th. But as of right now, I think they're 6th. Which means they'd face the Lakers in the first round, which could be a difficult matchup. But there's still so much to play out between now and then. I know it's less than a week, or a week now, I guess, until that final game against the Clippers, which is going to be a huge one at Chase Center next Sunday. That is going to be massive and could potentially decide where the Warriors end up, whether or not they're in the play-in tournament or not, who they play in the first round of the playoffs. Every game means so much from here on out, but it is disappointing that the Warriors weren't able to capitalize on the Nuggets loss and weren't able to grab that 4th seed in a game, again, that just didn't really feel like their style of game from the outset. I think Fitz put it brilliantly at the end of the first half, where he basically said that, if this was a boxing fight, then the Rockets have certainly got the fight on their hand, certainly got the fight in their favor at the moment. Again, their physical style, their defense was terrific, and they must be, they must gain plenty of recognition for that. The way they guarded Steph Curry, keeping him to 3 points on 1 of 10, shooting from the floor, 1 of 8 from 3-point range. His only basket was that one at the end of the first half, which was a tough pull-up off the Draymond screen. Aside from that, was the refereeing great? No, the refereeing was pretty average to awful. I thought the flagrant foul against Draymond at the start of the third quarter was absolutely horrific. That, to me, was closer to an and one layup than it was a flagrant 1 foul. When they went to the monitor, I was like, okay, there's no way they're upgrading this. This is an offensive foul. And then I thought to myself, well, if they don't upgrade it and it's just an offensive foul, can Steve Kerr then challenge the offensive foul and see if it actually becomes an and one? That's how it was bang bang play. I legitimately, and am I looking at this in with a Warrior lens? Yeah, probably, but I legitimately thought Draymond just went up in his normal shooting motion and Şengün's face just got in the way. I don't think there was any, when the ref came back to the monitor and said there's a massive wind up there before the contact and that's why it was a flagrant foul, it's just what wind up? That's just a normal shooting motion to go into a layup. And I think there was certainly a Draymond tax there where if that was anyone else, not only were you talking more significantly about that as not a flagrant foul, but as an actual and one. And of course it was Draymond's 5th foul, which put him out for the remainder of the third quarter. He had to come back and play in the fourth quarter with 5 fouls. He did well to play basically the rest of the game with 5 fouls, but that kind of 10-minute period there in the third quarter certainly makes an impact when one of your best players has to go to the bench. It certainly makes an impact. Was it the difference in the game? Probably not. Like, I don't think Houston were absolutely scorching offensively in this game. They put up 106 points, right? It wasn't necessarily that, we desperately needed Draymond to put fires out defensively. It was more so we needed Steph and Jimmy to get going offensively, and that was just never the case. Now, there was certainly some non-calls against Steph that's, on another day could have certainly gone his way, and we know that Steph doesn't get necessarily too much of a favorable whistle when it comes to the referees. But he still had a stinker. There's no other way to put it. Again, 1 of 10 shooting, 3 points. It's hard for the Warriors to win a game. I'm not sure the Warriors have ever won a game where Steph Curry has more turnovers than points. Like, it's basically impossible to win from that position. And in credit to them, like, they didn't give up. I think from the point in which Draymond got that flagrant foul, the Warriors were pushing uphill. I tweeted out at halftime that, hey, the Warriors are going to be, this is probably going to be their best win of the season, even above the back-to-back we just saw against the Lakers and Nuggets. Probably going to be their best win of the season because they are facing so many obstacles here. It feels like they're just pushing uphill. Everything's going against them. The style of game's going against them. That Draymond decision, the fact Steph's struggling, the fact Jimmy has, not really been too active offensively. He took 7 field goal attempts in this game. Was fairly efficient, 4 of 7. Got to the free throw line again a few times. Had 13 points. But at some point, we want to see more out of Jimmy Butler. He's now gone for 43 points here over the last 3 games, averaging less than 15. It's fine when Pods is going off, and Pods had a good game today as well, 19 points, one shy of Buddy Hield, who had a team-high 20. But at the end of the day, the Rockets are going to live with those guys trying to produce a scoring load and trying to win the game for Golden State over Steph Curry, over Jimmy Butler. And I think in that moment, you probably want to see more from Jimmy in this game. Obviously, he's been dealing with a bit of an arm issue as well, but I don't know. We'll wait and see. Hopefully, to me, like, this is Steph's one terrible performance. He can kind of get this one out of him, and then he's going to come back with a vengeance over the last 4 games and hopefully lift the Warriors to 4 victories because, again, I think if they win out, they're still in a good position here. This is a disappointing loss. It's not a disastrous loss completely. Again, like, fortune is still in their hands. I think the worst thing is going to be if let's say they lose to Phoenix on Tuesday and all of a sudden, like, their own fortune is now in the hands of others in terms of needing other teams to lose games. Again, at this point, if the Warriors just keep on winning and win out and win 4 in a row here, then pretty confident they'll get a top 6 seed and potentially even home court advantage. I think the biggest thing I took from this game that we can move forward with entering the final 4 games of the regular season and then entering the postseason is the rotation and the minutes we saw, and Steve leaning much more heavily into his tried and tested veteran players. If you look at some of the minutes here, it's Quentin Post, you're out. He played 6.5 minutes. He played a few minutes in the first half. Didn't play it all in the second half till like the last minute or 90 seconds of garbage time. So he was basically out. Guy Santos, 3.5 minutes for the game. You're out. It's Looney, you're in, 22 minutes. It's GP2, you're in, 20 minutes. And it's not just Post and Santos either. It's Moody, 14 minutes. Right, for Moses Moody, who's been so good for the Warriors basically for the last couple of months here. It's Kuminga, played less than Looney and Payton as well. I know some of you guys that were in the live stream briefly there were pointing to, okay, should we have seen more Kuminga minutes against the athleticism and size to try and match up with that of the Rockets? Potentially, yes. I thought he started his first stint in the first quarter pretty well. Didn't do a whole lot after that, but again, played less than 20 minutes. So you got those young guys. It was really only Pods as the one of the 5 young guys who played significant minutes, and that's really because the Warriors need him to. The Warriors actually, if you look at it, like, they really lack backcourt options. If you look at them prominent options off the bench, Buddy Hield obviously is a guard, but aside from that, you've got Kuminga as a front court option. GP2 is essentially a front court option because of how opposing teams guard him on the perimeter. They don't guard him at all, so really he's more of a front court option. Looney is as well, obviously Post is as well, Santos is as well. So it's basically all front court options for the Warriors off the bench, and I think if there's one hole in the roster right now, it's probably another guard option, a more consistent, more trustworthy option than Buddy Hield. It's where I think De'Anthony Melton, a fit, healthy De'Anthony Melton right now, would be absolutely amazing for the Warriors. We saw how he fit at the start of the season. If we can get him back in French in the offseason on a minimum deal, that'd be great, because I think right now, if you had like that trio of like Steph, Pods, and Melton as your kind of guard options, that'd be really good. And then Buddy could play some spot minutes again. He could play a little bit more like he did today. He played 25 minutes if he's scorching hot and shooting threes, and he made 6 today, team high 20 points. That's fine. But what we've seen from Buddy Hield over the course of basically the season now is that this guy is inconsistent. He's not a guy that you necessarily want to trust in too much, particularly when the stakes are higher coming into the playoffs. So I think the Warriors do lack guard options. And, what we're going to see now, I think, is Steve leaning heavily into his veteran guys. Again, Post, not necessarily a game for him. Gee, again, you could argue he should have played more. But I'm not saying that this was a mistake from Steve. I'm not saying that him going to Looney and GP2 over those other guys is necessarily a mistake. But it could be in the long term. I think he just wants consistency. He wants guys that he knows what he's going to get out of, rather than, let's say Kuminga, being a high ceiling, low floor player, could come in and have 15, 20 points for you really efficiently and really boost the offense, but he could also come in, shoot really inefficiently, have a heap of turnovers and really hurt you. Moody is kind of the same in terms of his shooting can come and go. He was 1 of 7 in this game, 1 of 4, missed 2 free throws crucially early in the second quarter, as did Post, who's obviously he's going to have some defensive concerns, and Steve wants to lean, I think, more heavily into defense potentially, and that means more Looney. So this is what we're going to see, and I think it's going to frustrate some fans with the young guys, their minutes cratering a little bit and the minutes of Loon and GP2 going up. And I think Steve's just really going to look at it and say, hey, thanks, young guys. Like Quentin Post, you've been a revelation. So have you, Gee. Like, you've been fantastic. Even Moses, like, you look at him and say, this is the first loss the Warriors have had with this starting lineup. They're now 14-1, and yet it's like, okay, Moses, if you've got it, then yeah, sure, but you're still not at that standard or still not at that level. I still don't have that trust in you where you're a guaranteed 25 minutes a night. If you don't have it, I'm yanking you. I'm putting you in a more veteran option. You're playing less than 15 minutes. Moses Moody is still kind of at that level. And as unfortunate and frustrating as it is for fans, that's kind of just what it's going to be, I think, over the course of the regular season. So that's the biggest over the course of the regular season and going into the playoffs here in the next few weeks. So it's going to be fascinating, but I think that's the biggest takeaway from me is this felt much more like a play. And, it is like the Warriors, this is playoff level basketball to a degree in terms of, yes, it's not a playoff game, but the standings in the West are so close that every game is essentially a must win. So you're seeing tightened rotations. You're seeing, what the head coach really wants to do when the stakes are at their highest. And that is, from a Steve Kerr perspective, playing Looney and playing GP2 and guys that he trusts, guys that have been there before, that he knows what he's going to get out of them, over guys that are going to be a little bit inconsistent and potentially give you more, but also potentially give you less. So to me, that's going to be the biggest watch over these last 4 games, is what this kind of rotation looks like, because you've still got like 11 guys who all, kind of warrant minutes in this rotation, but that's not going to be realistic. And I'm not going to be surprised if we see some Quentin Post DNPs, some Guy Santos DNPs, some Moody, playing under 15 minutes, some Kuminga playing under 20 minutes, right? Pods is really the only one, again, of those 5 young guys who is guaranteed to play 25, 30 minutes. And that's because he's earned it based on his play. Again, I thought he was pretty good today. 19 points, another, 3, hang on, what did he have? 4, double checking here. That's the Rockets lineup. Pods had 4 of 9 on 3, 7 of 14 from the field, 19.6 rebounds, 4 assists. So Pods played well again. Him and Buddy were able to take a little bit of advantage of, the fact they were blanketing Steph and Jimmy so much, but at the same time, Houston are going to live with wanting Buddy, having Buddy Hield and Brandon Pajemski try and win the game for the Warriors. I think most teams are going to live with that, and particularly that's how the Rockets came out and defended today, and in fairness to them, they executed it perfectly and they got the result. So full credit to the Rockets. Were the referees disappointing? Yes, they were. Again, that flagrant 1 foul on Draymond early in the third quarter just kind of continued to push things against Golden State, like they were already going against the Warriors. from early in that first quarter, I suppose, and particularly from the second quarter onwards, we saw the game get really physical, really chippy with Draymond and Şengün going back and forth with one another. Late in that first half, we saw Steph and Ime Udoka have some words as well. So it just was not a Warrior style game. It just never felt like they had it on their terms. And full credit to the Rockets. They were able to make timely shots. Brooks was excellent, 24 points, 10 of 13 shooting. Jalen Green got going in the second half, 21 points. Şengün, look, I didn't really, I kind of was laughing a little bit when he was barking. Him and Draymond were going head to head late in that first half, and then he got an and one, and he was just going off his nuts. And I thought to myself, is that really your go? Are you really the one to be out there, barking like Draymond does, and Draymond has for over a decade? But in credit to Şengün, he didn't back down from the challenge whatsoever. He met it head on and, finished with 19 points and 14 rebounds and was a factor in the game. So, you know what? The Warriors' 20 turnovers, I think, was, probably the biggest issue in this game. And Steph was a big part of that. Draymond and Pods also, I think, had 4 each. Those three guys combined for 12 of the 20. And I said this on the post-game live, and some of you guys probably heard it at the start there, but I really feel like when you come up against an elite defense and the pressure that they apply to you, particularly on the perimeter with what they were doing to Steph and whatnot, it's not just that pressure, but it's the perceived pressure, and this happens across all sport. I know it happens in Australian rules football, probably happens in NFL and stuff like that, where it's the perceived pressure of then you having to try and force things. And, there's a pass where Draymond tried to throw it over the top to Jimmy in the fourth quarter, and it just wasn't quite on, and it didn't execute it. It didn't execute it perfectly, and it had to be executed perfectly for it to work. And it's one of those ones where you didn't really need to try that, but I can see why you are, because you know that, okay, if we just get into a half-court offense against this team, we are going to really, really struggle. And therefore, you just push for things that aren't necessarily there to try and make things a little bit easier for you, because, again, you know that if you do get into a half-court set, you probably don't have too much going on. And so it's that perceived pressure. It's the pressure forcing you into things that you wouldn't necessarily do, that you aren't necessarily comfortable in. Some of the passes where it's like, all right, let me slip this one in there to try and get a layup at the rim. Oh no, we've turned the ball over. They're just really, really good defensively. And that comes with a kind of reputation as well, where you have to be on your game, and you need to try and sometimes force the plays that aren't quite there. And I think that's what kind of hurt Golden State in this game, where you're making decisions and rushing things in a way that you wouldn't necessarily against a team where they're not going to apply anywhere near the same kind of defensive pressure. And I think it happens in sport across the board, not just in the NBA, but full credit must go to the Rockets defense for how they guarded Steph in this game and how their defense was in general. So a disappointing result for the Warriors, no doubt about that. I think, again, the biggest thing for me from this game, obviously, in terms of losing it, was the turnovers, but in terms of moving forward here, I think, the rotation and what we see with the young guys compared to the tried and tested guys of Loon and GP2, that's probably going to be the biggest fascination for me in terms of the rotation and how Steve balances out those minutes. I'll finish it up there. Thank you very much to those of you that have tuned in. Apologies to those of you, again, that were on the post-game live and saw me just embarrass myself for 10 minutes or so there with talking while the mic wasn't working. So I apologize for that again. We'll try and have another crack on Tuesday, but there's been some issues recently, no doubt about that. I'll try and lift my game. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. Follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. Of course, you can continue to follow my work over on BlueManHoop.com as well on a daily basis. Appreciate you guys once again. Again, apologies for the post-game live. Hopefully you can join me after the Suns game. I'll make sure it's working. Fingers crossed it's working anyway. Much appreciated again, guys.